shall I go? What shall I do?
Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn.
Behave yourselves!
Hello YouTubers out there, this is Jerry Saravia the Movies. So today we're looking at a new good bad movie. That's right, Death Wish 4 The Crackdown. This is a J. Lee Thompson film made back in 1987, starring of course Charles Bronson, replaying his role of the architect Paul Kersey. So let's talk about the evolution of this character. Okay, so in the original Death Wish from 1974, which was directed by Michael Winner. Michael Winner did the first 3 Death Wish pictures. He was just an architect and had no real interest in violence or killing anybody at all or wanting to hurt anybody. But his wife is raped, and one thing leads to another. He becomes a vigilante, reluctantly, but he does it nonetheless. So think of him as, for those of you who are around during the 80s, as the Bernard Getz. He was a subway vigilante from the 1980s in New York. So, Paul Kersey then in Death Wish 2, which is a movie I have really no real desire to see again. I may look at it briefly if it's available for free. I didn't do it with preparation for this at all because I saw Death Wish 2 on video back in 1983, 84. My father was a Charles Bronson fan, so he saw every Charles Bronson movie, pretty much, including seeing in theaters The Evil That Men Do, and, oh God, what was the other one? Possibly 10 to Midnight. I know he didn't like The Evil That Men Do, but he was a major Bronson fan. And I do like Charles Bronson. But anyway, so by the second Death Wish, he's sort of a one-man army, a little bit. I think his daughter, I can't remember if his daughter is the one that's raped and then she commits suicide. Pretty ugly movie from what I remember. But that was over 40 years ago. So, okay. Now, Death Wish 3, I saw over a year ago for the first time. And that is also another good bad movie from Canon Pictures, the Golden and Globus, corporation. Or anyway, so that movie, he is basically a one-man army once again. And his, I think it's his girlfriend, is killed by by this gang, essentially the gang that's running the streets of this particular neighborhood. And he gets himself one of those machine guns, and there you go. He starts shooting and mowing down just about anybody who is or looks like a gang member. Now with Death Wish 4, the interesting thing about this picture is that it starts with Paul Kersey having a nightmare. That's the opening scene of the picture. And the nightmare is there's a woman in a very darkly lit, to say the least, parking lot. It's just your typical thing that you've seen probably a million times before, particularly during this time in the 1980s, if not earlier. She's walking to her car, she gets in, and she can't start the car. Okay? So, then you see one hoodlum, perhaps, or a person masked, you don't know, but they're standing over a light, so they're kind of a silhouette. And then she's still starting the car. She looks up again, then there are 2. She's starting up the car, then there are 3. And then they disappear. Right away I thought, okay, well this is probably either a dream or a nightmare. I mean, right away it just didn't seem possible. And then they attack her from behind, they bust through the windows, they take her out, they slap her, they punch her in the face, and they're ready to rape her, ready to remove her clothes. And there's Paul Kersey. Oh, what do you want? They're looking at this guy. And Paul Kersey then shoots them, of course. And then Paul Kersey, it's a nightmare. He wakes up. Anyway, so then the movie hasn't exactly started yet, but before you know it, it picks up the speed almost immediately. And now he is in Los Angeles, and he is an architect of his own firm. And there is this young woman named Erica, played by Dana Barron, who you might know from National Lampoon's Vacation and Heaven Help Us. I always liked her. I've only seen her in a few movies, but nonetheless, she is Not exactly a stepdaughter yet, because he is dating a tabloid reporter played by Kay Lenz. So they're living together, but they're not married, and she's looking for a commitment. The young girl is interested in architecture as well and has drawn up some plans of, some illustrations and things, and he's not bad, not great, but not bad. And so that's starting the movie. Then she goes on a date. That's the young girl, Erica. And Paul Kersey's not too sure about her date. It's this guy with, blonde hair. It looks very much like 1980s. And they take off, and she decides to have cocaine and takes maybe too much. And they go to an amusement park, which is where they get the drugs. And then she dies. So Paul Kersey is upset, trying to figure out maybe the boyfriend has something to do with it. The boyfriend leads him back to the amusement park after her death. I mean, she dies pretty quickly. Dana Barron had a very small part in this movie. He sees who the drug pushers are, and one of them he actually kills. So then there's the one drug pusher who, by her blonde boyfriend, says, "Listen, I'm going to tell the police," and then he stabs the boyfriend. And then Paul Kersey shoots the drug pusher, and he falls into his electrified fence or something. So anyway, then Paul Kersey is hired by this millionaire who says, "I want you to become a one-man army. You find these two particular drug lords and kill them. Kill all the drug pushers because we need them out." So Paul Kersey says, "I don't do things like that, but I have to think about it." So Paul Kersey thinks about it and decides to accept the job, which is basically to become, I guess, some sort of an assassin, a professional assassin on the part of this millionaire. And he hunts down these two drug lord groups who are sort of at war with each other, and that's how the whole movie goes. Then there turns out there's a cop who is corrupt, and Paul Kersey, I have to tell you, most of this movie is so implausible because he's able to get out of situations so quickly. He just shoots people and that's it. He shoots, in fact, sometimes it doesn't even matter who the people are. I mean, it's one thing to try to kill these two rivals, right? These two rival drug gangs. But then he finds a factory where they are making all this cocaine, this crack cocaine, and he shoots them all and blows them up and does this and that. And I thought, gee, I mean, the message of this movie is essentially anyone who does drugs, manufactures drugs, sells drugs, is a bad guy, is a villain, and needs to be killed. In fact, that's what the millionaire tells them. They need to be killed. They're doing drugs. They're selling drugs, rather. Anyone that sells drugs, and I think even the millionaire says, and does drugs, which is really something, needs to be killed. And that's what this movie is. But I have to say that Death Wish 4 was entertaining. I mean, I was not bored for a second. It flies by. I think it's 99 minutes long. As I mentioned before, it's directed by J. Lee Thompson, who's not known for making good bad movies, really. He did make some movies with Charles Bronson, 10 to Midnight, The Evil That Men Do, St. Ives, The White Buffalo, Murphy's Law, and this movie. And yet he was a director who, back in the day, he did two really great movies, The Guns of Navarone and the original Cape Fear with Robert Mitchum. But this isn't a step down, but it's just so odd. And there are two things that, for those of you who like plot holes, and often mention plot holes that aren't plot holes, which I've noticed, this definitely serves as one. So there's a scene where Paul Kersey pretends to be a bartender. He gets a job as a bartender for this one drug lord who has this mansion and open bar. He's one of those. Okay, so they have a few of those. He's one of them. And so the idea is he goes into their mansion, to this guy's mansion, and puts listening bugs their phones, essentially. And so he's in the mansion, and then he hides himself in the bathroom because the main drug lord is coming in, and they kill someone who has been stealing drugs or something going on there, trying to either take the money or the drugs for himself. And so Kersey witnesses it. Then they hear a noise. They see him in the bathroom. They said, look, we'll let this go as long as you help carry the body. Oh, sure. I mean, Paul Kersey is so agreeable in this movie. It's really quite something. And so they take the body out, and then the one henchman, there's this little exchange between him and the drug lord. The idea being they're going to kill Paul Kersey, because of course he's a witness to a crime now. And Paul Kersey knocks him out, and then he takes him and with the trunk of the car knocks him out on his neck. I think he kills him. And so then the interesting thing is that after that, the two drug lords, he thinks someone else is involved. Who is killing my people? Because Paul Kersey starts killing lots of his his people that are associated, drug pushers and so on, with this drug lord. And he thinks it's someone else. But he saw Paul Kersey, and he knows Paul Kersey, maybe not by name, but he knows that he was probably responsible for killing one of his henchmen, and never thinks for a second that maybe Paul Kersey is involved, and never mentions it in the entire movie. And I thought, wow, that's a plot hole right there. Then there's a sequence later on where Paul Kersey has his telescopic rifle, and the two war gangs are shooting each other, which is what he wanted. And there are shots, close-up shots, which is really strange. I don't understand why they did this. Usually when henchmen, even anonymous henchmen, are shooting with a machine gun or an Uzi, you see their shot here, full profile, including their face and everything else. And for some reason, there's a focus only on the gun. Right, so it's a close-up shot, but of the gun, not the person that's actually shooting. Usually, that's what you see in most movies. So there are close-up shots of Uzis firing. I don't understand that one at all. And then this is a spoiler alert. This whole review. But at the very end, it turns out the millionaire is not who he claimed to be, and it turns out he is another drug lord, or wants to be one. I wasn't quite clear on that. And kills Kay Lenz, Paul's girlfriend. Now, for some reason, throughout the whole movie, after Erica's death, being her stepdaughter, or her daughter rather, from the first 10 minutes of the movie, she's not seen again, pretty much up until the climax of the picture, because she's trying to get a story to write about the drug addiction and drug problem in LA in general. And she manages to score an interview with one of the drug pushers, but she's lured into a trap, and then she's killed. And he sees what happens, Paul Kersey, and then he kills that guy, and that's the end of the movie. And there's no, their relationship is not built upon much, because there's nothing there. She's never seen again up until the climax of the movie. So a throwaway role for Kay Lenz, who, is a pretty good actress. But anyway, the movie, though, is just, it's just complete mess, but it is so entertaining. And Charles Bronson has some lines that are just, they're not one-liners, but they're funny in only the way Bronson could deliver them.
Yeah. I know your face. Did you ever live in San Francisco?
I'm from Idaho.
Death Wish 4: The Crackdown, released back in 1987, not a big box office hit. Then there was one more Death Wish movie, which I never really saw more than the first 5 minutes, and I don't really think I need to see it. Death Wish 5, The Face of Death, which unfortunately was Charles Bronson's last picture. So, Bronson just, he found himself in the position of playing always some variation of Paul Kersey. He was always a good actor, I think. I don't know how nuanced Charles Bronson was. I couldn't really say that, but he had such presence, and the way in his line delivery, and then after a while, it's like he just sort of gave up and didn't really care anymore. in terms of the roles that he was either playing, which he had issues with this movie while they were shooting. They always had to do rewrites, apparently, according to the screenwriter, because he was not happy with this line or that line or whatever. And he was also not happy with, particularly in Death Wish 3, he said, I just didn't like the idea of mowing down all these people, all these anonymous gang members who we don't know them at all. There's only one, major head of the gang, and maybe a couple of other characters you get to know, but otherwise there's a whole bunch of these other people. We don't know who the hell they are, and he shoots them all. He didn't, just didn't care for that. It just felt like violence without any real substance, which I've talked about before. This movie is not gory. It's violent, but it's so cartoonish, some of it, that it's difficult to really take seriously at all. And coming from this director, who has dealt with realistic violence to some degree in his earlier pictures, whatever. But Death Wish 4, The Crackdown, I have to say, I didn't think, I'm going to hate this movie. I knew I probably wouldn't care for it, but I found it entertaining. So it's a bad movie, but it's entertaining. But there's really nothing to gravitate towards in this movie other than the fact that all of it is just implausible and it's just funny, unintentionally so. It's just too funny. Not a single believable moment. So let me your thoughts. Tell me what you think of the Death Wish series or Charles Bronson in general. Do you think he just gave up after a while, didn't care anymore, wasn't offered the roles that maybe he deserved? I would agree with that. Keep in mind, Charles Bronson did manage in 1991 to score a role which he was very good in, and he also shaved his mustache. That's his trademark. For a Sean Penn film, which was the first Sean Penn directed film, called The Indian Runner. He was very good in that. But, that's the one exception. I mean, I haven't seen all the late 80s Charles Bronson movies. Some of them I might check out, like 10 to Midnight, things like that. But, there are earlier Bronson films I haven't seen yet. So, it's just a shame. But I think he'll always be remembered. There's no question in my mind about that. And he has a great name. His real name was Charles Buczynski, so Bronson, good name for an action hero. Anyway, let me your thoughts. Tell me what you think about Death Wish 4 or any of the Death Wish movies. And if you aren't a subscriber, please subscribe. And if you are a subscriber, please hit that notification bell for future uploads. And that's all I got to say about Death Wish 4, The Crackdown, my new favorite good bad movie. And this is Jerry Saravia, The Movies, signing off.